President Bola Tinubu on Wednesday signed the Student Loans Reenactment Bill into law. The new legislation repeals the previous Student Loans Act of 2023 and reenacts the Student Loans Bill from 2004. The executive bill establishes the Nigerian Education Loan Fund as a corporate body tasked with receiving, managing, and investing funds to private loans to Nigerians pursuing higher education, vocational training, and skills acquisition programs. Tonight, let's speak with Senior Special Advisor to the President on Media and Publicity, Ajuri Ngelale, as it gives us more insights into this reworked bill. Good evening to you, Ajuri. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. Thank you.
Good evening to you, my sister, and good evening to all of our viewers here at home and around the world.
Right, so this is good news, which serves as one of the fulfillment of the President's promises to revitalize education. What does this mean for indigent Nigerian students?
You know, look, the President is taking a multifaceted approach to alleviating the economic burdens that have been placed on Nigerian families across the country over the last several months. A major one is obviously what His Excellency Mr. President campaigned around the country on, which was the provision of a new national student loan program. That promise was fulfilled, as you rightly mentioned earlier this week, as the President signed the amendment bill of the Access to Higher Education Act into law. I think the first point to mention is that with the amended legislation that has now been signed into effect by Mr. President, effectively what the President has done is to expand the scope of beneficiaries across the country. Initially, the first iteration of the Act essentially dealt only with tuition, particularly in traditional four-year university education programs, law, agric science, medicine, and the like. Now, the President is essentially, with this amendment, has now widened the scope to include vocational technical education, skills acquisition, facilitation, and other critical aspects of our economy that have to do with really the blue-collar segment of the economic sphere. We want to ensure that young Nigerians who are able-bodied, who have very skilled hands with respect to carpentry, manufacturing, plumbing, and many other trades that are currently present in the economic space in the country, that we're able to provide them with world-class training and skills acquisition so that they can participate very directly in the inclusive economy that Mr. President is building for Nigerians into future generations. The President is focused also with this amendment bill on ensuring that the encumbrances that have long been present with respect to access to education for Nigerian families and Nigerian students are removed, especially having to do with thresholds that were placed in the first iteration of the Act on certain income levels that would basically be removed from the pool of beneficiaries of the student loan program. So specifically speaking, the first iteration of the Act essentially said that any household of more than 500,000 naira annually, not monthly, breaking down to less than 45,000 naira a month, that any child from such a household that is above that threshold of 45,000 naira monthly income would essentially be barred from participating and benefiting from the student loan program. We removed the income threshold requirement to ensure that all classes of Nigerian families are able to send their children to trade schools and universities as part of this program. Secondly, we removed the guarantor requirement, which essentially stipulated within the first iteration of the Act that any beneficiary would have to track down specific sets of individuals who would basically serve as guarantors on the loans that they would be obtaining from the Nigeria Education Loans Fund, the NEL Fund. We have removed that requirement as to ensure that we open up the space and we don't, subject our young people to, weeks and months and potentially years of looking for contacts and connections and, these individuals who will stand as guarantors. We want to open up the space for them with that. So removing the income threshold, removing the guarantor component mandate were very strategic amendments that featured in the amended act that Mr. President has now signed into law, really opening up the space for Nigerian families across the country. In addition, the President also saw to the introduction of a new justice and fairness provision, which essentially stipulates that within every financial year, that this fund will be in operation. And again, this is going to be running in perpetuity. This is not timed to 2 years or 5 years or 10 years or even 20 years. This is a new federal program that will be present into the foreseeable future. He essentially mandated that within every financial year that there is a clear calculation and guarantee that every single part of this country, all local government areas of the Federation, all states of the Federation, cutting across all ethnic groups, all sexes, all religious affiliations, and all of the various kind of national points of difference, that they are factored into the calculation as to the spread of this loan program. We don't want a situation where there's any type of institutional skew favoring one ethnicity, favoring one religion, or favoring any gender over the others. And also, again, this deals with also the physically challenged members of the society, of at least the physically disadvantaged members of our youth population as well. We want to make sure that everybody's protected, that there's an equitable spread of participation in the new National Student Loan Program. So that provision is there, and it is by law, in full respect for federal character principle, which is obviously a priority of President Bola Tinubu's administration now and moving into the future. In addition to that, the President also ensured that there are very clear legal powers and regulatory guidances that have been attached to the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, the NEL Fund, essentially giving it the legal authority to sue and be sued in its own name, giving it the legal authority to be able to initiate recovery proceedings against any beneficiary who has abused the process or in any way attempted to engage in sharp practices with respect to their obligation of successfully taking out the loan and then successfully paying the loan back. We want to ensure that with the new stipulations in the amended bill, that the President is saying, look, we want to assist Nigerian families. We want to empower our young people to get an education that will ultimately remove them and their generations from, the jaws and teeth of poverty. But in so doing, we are also demanding that our young people act with integrity, that they act in the best interest of not just themselves, but in the best interest of all other young people that ultimately will be utilizing this important program for their own self-actualization. And we have put in place in this amendment act essentially a few stipulations that deal with that. One is that there is a mandate now for every beneficiary to pay back to begin the repayment process of the loan that they had obtained within 2 years following the conclusion of their participation in the National Youth Service Corps scheme. That's one part of it. But because Mr. President understands that there is a possibility that our young people may not have found either formal engagement in an existing enterprise or may not have engaged in any entrepreneurial activity that would see to some sort of an inflow of resource that they would use to obviously maintain themselves. He has also put in an additional stipulation that says if they have not found work within the 2-year within that 2-year period beyond which there would be a recovery proceedings that would be enforced by NEL Fund, that they can now obtain a sworn affidavit in court, essentially swearing on oath that they have not been able to find an income within that time, find employment and engagement within that time. And on the basis of that, we can now extend the period of enforcement that NEL Fund would obviously conduct its recovery proceedings within. So that's one part of it. But we have also said that even as we envisage the potential difficulty that our young borrower would face potentially in finding a job immediately after leaving school, we've also ensured that there's a mandate and a legal provision that protects the NEL Fund with respect to any violation on the part of a young borrower who has borrowed money and has lied or perjured themselves by essentially giving a false account on oath in any sworn affidavit that they provide, seeking an extension of the repayment period. Then essentially what would happen is they would now be liable to a felony, which obviously deals with a minimum of 3 years in prison and several other fine possibilities and the like. So we are on the one hand being considerate and compassionate. On the other hand, we are ensuring that there is a red line beyond which there would be no excuses or conditions allowed, and that has to do with any type of fraud, any type of illegitimate action on the part of any young borrower. But we have full confidence in young Nigerians. We believe that they are going to key into this program in a way that is integrous, in a way that is reflective of who we are as a people, and we are very much believing that with the expansion of the pool of beneficiation that the president has enacted with this amendment act, and with the new ability of our young people to not just get help with their tuition, but also now, by virtue of this amendment, receive help to, for example, pay for their hostel, pay for where they're living, to have an upkeep allowance for feeding. We have now created a dual structure where on the one hand we pay the tuition directly to the institution, and on the other hand we have a direct provision to the student borrower for, like I said, the provision of where they are living and for their living expenses, after which of course they would pay back all of these resources to the NEL Fund according to the contract that they've entered into on the basis of the new legal authorities that Mr. President has given to the NEL Fund by virtue of this amended act. You take all of that together and you'll recognize that not only was the first iteration, of course, fundamentally flawed in some ways, but that the President took a very careful review of the initial act and dealt decisively with every aspect of shortcoming that was found in the initial act, with very, very comprehensive solutions signed into law by His Excellency Mr. President just a few days ago.
All right, quite detailed. But how do you react to the issues raised around reduced accountability, meaning shifting from a committee-led administration to a corporate structure? People say this may lead to reduced oversight and accountability, raising concerns about the proper management of funds and resources. How do you react to that?
I'm sorry, my dear sister, the very first part of your question, I didn't get to hear it. Can you repeat that, please?
All right, so there are those who have raised concerns about reduced accountability. For them, shifting from a committee-led administration to a corporate structure may lead to reduced oversight and accountability issues. They're raising concerns about the proper management of funds and resources. So how do you react to this?
Well, it is always going to be on the table of conversation in the country. When you have a large pool of funds being administered for almost any purpose, there will be questions about accountability given, our long history with maladministration and misappropriation. So that's not a surprise. But it is our job to ensure that Nigerians fully understand the difference between how President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is conducting the affairs of the nation and how it had been conducted in the past by previous leaders. With respect to this program, as part of the amendment bill, what Mr. President has essentially achieved is a new layering of governance framework within the Nigerian education loan fund, institution as an entity, ensuring that we no longer have any type of, the first iteration of the Act did not provide any very clear specificity around how the administration of the NEL fund would work, aside from the fact that there was an executive secretary who was answerable to the Central Bank of Nigeria, or the governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria. Now we have a very clear governance structure. In fact, just this evening, Mr. President at least we announced the approval of the appointment of a new management fund for the Nigerian Education Loan Fund, which retained the former executive secretary of the fund, Mr. Akintunde Sawyer, but he is coming back in the new role, effectively as the managing director and chief executive officer, within the new governance framework that also has created two executive directors that will support the operations of the fund, being the executive director of finance and administration and the executive director of operations, two positions of which were not present in the first iteration of the Act, have now been appointed this evening. In addition to that, the President has created a new governing board that will oversee the day-to-day operation and management of the NEL Fund. That board will be composed and announced in due course, but there is another level, a layer of accountability over which the day-to-day management will be supervised. But the President has also said that in addition to, by virtue of the Amendment Act, in addition to creating these new layers of governance and supervision, what he's also done is he has also created the legislative backing for the provision and operation of a technological backbone that would essentially ensure that every borrower is not simply applying in some sort of manual fashion that wouldn't necessarily be easy to track and supervise, but is now, mandated effectively by the amended Act to engage in a technological back process that would see to the involvement of the NIMC, that would involve, their NIN numbers, that would involve their BVNs, that would essentially track the mobilization of funds from the source accounts to the beneficiary accounts in terms of the aspect of the loan that would deal with the living expenses of the student that is being paid directly to the student. We want to be able to track those resources in such a way that there is full accountability for that, and that there isn't any middleman, there isn't any government funded consultant handling some of these very critical processes. On the other hand, the President is also ensuring that we have we are not putting the tuition funds in the hands of our students, hoping that they're going to do the right thing. It can be tempting when you get into the millions of naira for a child from a household that has not necessarily, had a lot of, millions of naira flowing into the hands of individuals. You don't want to tempt people to do the wrong thing, right? So we also ensure that we pay the large-scale funding directly to the institution from the borrower as well. So there are a lot of layers, whether it's the governance framework of the NEL Fund itself and the new legal authorities that we have empowered them with, or it is the fact that we are paying the smaller amounts of money directly to the borrower through a technological process that can be tracked, and then of course the fact that we're paying the institutions themselves the large-scale funding that deals with tuition. We want to ensure that there's accountability. And again, the last point I would make on the accountability question, which is very fundamental, is the fact that within this legislation, we have also ensured that there is a place for university administrators, or in the case of vocational technical education centers and skills acquisition centers, that there is a point of sign-off, right? We don't want a situation where we have borrowers who have no intention of completing a law degree or completing a medicine degree, or even going through a program that deals with, automobile manufacturing, for example, in a vocational technical center. We don't want a situation where people see this as an opportunity to just access funds that they can take quickly with no intention of paying back and no intention of upgrading their skills. So what we've done is to also add a feature that would ensure that at every needed time interval, so whether it's a semester or by term and the like, that we have a continuous sign-off from the officials who are employed by these institutions to, essentially verify and validate that our young people that are taking out funds to be a part of these institutions, to go through these institutions, are actually going through the programs. And again, it's not just tied to attendance. We're not just saying if you show up at school, it's good enough. No. What we are saying is that you first of all have to show up and be passing your classes, but you also, there is a requirement in terms of academic eligibility. If you are not on course to graduate from the accredited institution that you are borrowing through, then you will not be able to access your loan facility for the next term or for the next semester or for the next time interval that's involved. So these are the various levels of accountability that Mr. President, in his deep thinking manner, has put in place through this timely amendment of the Access to Higher Education Act.